started when Jackson turned towards the Potter family, something deputies were watching for.
Her actions were controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. This was not reckless driving. This was murder.
Seandell Jackson. Jackson was a convicted felon who had shot someone a few hours before he killed Nathan Potter for the same reason. It was a robbery, but he told the judge he thought he was having fun. A few hours before Potter's murder, at least one person dialed 911 to report a couple of sketchy characters lurking around the neighborhood. There had been a robbery there the night before. They were Jackson and his friend. The police never showed up. On November 21st, 2009, a 22-year-old man named Nathan Potter walked to his car after a night out with his friends near the University of Wisconsin-Milwaukee campus. He had no idea that his life was about to end in a senseless act of violence. As Potter reached his car, 4 masked men approached him and demanded his money and phone. Potter refused to give up his belongings and tried to run away. But one of the robbers, later identified as Seandell Jackson, pulled out a gun and shot him in the back, killing him instantly. The robbers then fled the scene with Potter's wallet and phone, leaving his body on the ground. A witness who was nearby saw the incident and called 911. He also described the robbers and their vehicles, which was crucial for the investigation. Detectives Jones and Smith, assigned to the case, interviewed the witness and ran a check on the car license plate. By the morning after the murder, they had discovered that it belonged to Jackson's uncle, who lived in a nearby neighborhood. They also learned that Jackson, 19 years old at the time, had a criminal record and was wanted for another robbery. Jackson's uncle tipped off the police about his whereabouts. He said he felt guilty for not stopping him from committing the crime, and he was afraid of what Jackson would do to him or his family. The police tracked down and arrested Jackson on October 28, 2009, at a motel in Milwaukee. Jackson faced trial on March 15, 2010, for first-degree intentional homicide and robbery. The trial lasted for 5 days. The prosecution and defense presented their arguments and evidence. The prosecution argued that Jackson was a cold-blooded killer who deserved the maximum penalty. The defense argued that Jackson was a troubled young man who acted in self-defense and deserved leniency. According to the complaint and search warrant affidavit, witnesses at both shootings identified Jackson from a group of photos. Shell casings recovered from both shootings came from the same gun. The police also learned that Jackson had an accomplice named D. During the trial and sentencing, Jackson showed no sign of regret or sorrow over his crimes. He rained obscenities at the court and even smiled at the victim's family while being escorted out of the courtroom. Potter's father, John Potter, addressed Judge Rebecca Dallett during the trial. He said, "Judge, there is nothing that can be said to bring back our Nathan." But he asked for the punishment to fit the horrific crime. He asked, "Is there such a thing as pure evil?" "We think so." On April 12, 2010, Seandell Jackson was brought back to the courtroom for his sentencing. When Jackson's mother had the chance to speak, she said she first heard about the killing on TV.
When I saw it on the news, I even cried. I'm like, oh my God, I can't imagine what that mother is going through. I never had a clue that my child had anything to do with it. My son is not a monster. He is not a monster.
At the sentencing, history repeated itself. Jackson tried to turn Potter's family. He was restrained by deputies as his family wailed, cursed, and berated Potter's family. Milwaukee County Circuit Judge Rebecca Dallett addressed Jackson and said,
"Life and the need to protect the community, which I also fear for with Mr. Jackson being out in the community. I am going to go ahead on count 1, the first-degree intentional homicide conviction, and I am going to sentence Mr. Jackson to life imprisonment without possibility for extended supervision."
The judge had decided to sentence Jackson to life in prison without the possibility of parole. Upon hearing the verdict, Seandell shouted profanities and insults at the jury, the judge, the prosecutor, and Potter's parents, who were present in the courtroom. He tried to attack them but was restrained by the police officers. Seandell was wrestled to the ground, pepper sprayed, and dragged out of the courtroom, still screaming and cursing. While his reaction was intense, he was not the only one who lost control. Jackson's family members in the back of the courtroom started hurling insults at Potter's mother after the sentencing, saying, The courtroom scene was so ugly that Jackson's reaction continued to garner much attention years after the sentencing. In February 2014, syndicated radio host Doug Banks posted a news report that purportedly showed Jackson crying during the sentencing. However, many people pointed out that Jackson was not crying. He was throwing cuss words at the judges as deputies wrestled him to the ground.
Life with the possibility of parole. That's what a judge decided. For prosecutors, it's a big win. But for those who were hoping Nehemiah Griego would get a second chance at living a normal life, well, we now know he will spend the better part of, if not the rest of his life, behind bars.
Nehemiah Griego. In some sermons for the local jail in New Mexico, Pastor Greg Griego shared his journey of how he repented from being a Californian gangster to finding God and becoming a pastor at a local church. But despite this inspiring transformation, Pastor Greg could not save his teenage son. Nehemiah Griego was the 7th of 10 children born to Greg, and the second child born to Sarah, a devout couple who lived in South Valley, New Mexico. While Greg was out of the house speaking in local jails, Sarah homeschooled Nehemiah and his siblings. Nehemiah actively participated in the church, engaging in mission trips and assisting with the youth ministry. Nehemiah looked up to his father, who once served in the military and frequently wore his father's uniform. However, a dark cloud hovered over Nehemiah's mind. He had secret fantasies about plotting mass murder and then killing himself. These twisted thoughts eventually manifested into a heinous plan to murder his family, others, and himself. Greg and Sarah had a gun closet, which Nehemiah had access to once Greg taught him how to use it once. Little did Greg know that this precautionary act would be his greatest undoing. On January 19, 2013, Nehemiah's life took a terrifying turn. Just before the rest of the family went to bed that night, Nehemiah had a heated argument with his mother, who sent him to bed early. Seething with rage, Nehemiah waited until the whole house was asleep and charged into his parents' room, where his mother slept with her 9-year-old son, Zephaniah. Nehemiah grabbed a .22 rifle from his parents' closet and shot his mother in the head. When Zephaniah woke up, Nehemiah told him that he had shot their mother. Nehemiah turned on the lights and forced Zephaniah to look at the motionless body of their now deceased mother. Zephaniah's screams filled the air as he was overcome with fear and anguish, prompting Nehemiah to shoot his brother in the head as well. Tragically, his rampage continued, killing 5-year-old and 2-year-old sisters Jael and Angelina. A few minutes later, Nehemiah's 12-year-old girlfriend got an email, a photo of Sarah's body. Nehemiah camped in a bathroom and waited for his father to return home from work. Upon his arrival at 5 a.m. in the morning, Nehemiah shot his father multiple times with an AR-15 type semi-automatic rifle. He then loaded the 2 guns in his parents' van and drove to his church, where he deceived his girlfriend and other church members that his family got killed in a car accident. He told some members that the family's home was invaded by mysterious gunmen. He also planned to go to the nearest Walmart, kill more people, and die in a shootout with the police. Thankfully, his pastor and retired homicide detective became suspicious of Nehemiah's behavior and story, leading him to call 911. They drove Nehemiah back to his house, where they found the lifeless bodies of his family members. Nehemiah confessed to the murder and was charged with 5 counts of first-degree murder and child abuse, resulting in death. He was tried as an adult under New Mexico law, which prohibits the death sentence or life in prison without the possibility of parole for juveniles. In October 2015, Nehemiah pleaded guilty to 2 counts of second-degree murder and 3 counts of child abuse, resulting in death. Initially, a family court judge offered a juvenile sentence that would have allowed Nehemiah's release after therapy at 21. However, the prosecution filed an appeal, and the decision was revoked by the Court of Appeal in 2019. Nehemiah was sentenced to life in jail as an adult with a chance of parole after serving 30 years for murdering his siblings and 7 years for murdering his parents. When the judge allowed him to address his family and the judge, he sounded very soft-spoken and emotional as he expressed his regret and apologies for what had happened.
I am sorry for taking our parents and our sins. I wish I could take it back, but reality is that we can't.
He told them that he had healed from the incident and was ready to move on.
Want no retaliation. I love you guys, and I want to see the best for y'all, and whatever you may do. And I do pray for you guys to have healing the way I'm having healing.
The terrible case divided the Griego family, with his aunt and uncle lobbying for Nehemiah's juvenile sentence, while his sisters and the state fought to keep him in prison. He still appreciated his aunt and uncle for supporting and pushing for his release from jail.
Nobody's ever shown me that kind of mercy and that kind of compassion the way you guys have. And I'm so damn grateful for you guys.
However, what he said next made his sisters very angry.
You've basically been a second father to me. You're the father I wish I had.
Nehemiah's statement made his sister cry and storm out of the courtroom. Nehemiah filed an appeal with the New Mexico Supreme Court in April 2020, claiming that he should have been punished as a juvenile owing to poor mental health care before his sentencing hearing. His legal team claimed he had post-traumatic stress disorder, schizophrenia, and brain damage due to parental abuse and neglect. They also highlighted his display of regret and recovery while in detention. On the other hand, the state opposed the appeal, noting Nehemiah's threat to society and systematic manipulation to avoid accountability. Nehemiah Griego was eventually sentenced to 3 concurrent life terms plus 7 years to run concurrently, with the life sentences with credit awarded for 2,476 days, 6 years, and 285 days previously spent, and must spend 30 years before becoming eligible for parole. MacKenzie Shirilla. MacKenzie Shirilla, a 19-year-old woman from Ohio, was sentenced to 15 years to life in prison on Monday for intentionally crashing her car into a building at 160 kilometers per hour, killing her boyfriend and his friend. The judge said that Shirilla's actions were...
Her actions were controlled, methodical, deliberate, intentional, and purposeful. This was not reckless driving. This was murder.
The crash happened on July 31st, 2020, around 10:30 a.m. in Strongsville, a suburb of Cleveland. Shirilla drove a Toyota Camry with her boyfriend, Dominic Russo, 20, and his friend, Davian Flanagan, 19. They were all wearing seatbelts and had no alcohol or drugs in their system. According to the police report, Shirilla accelerated her car and crashed into the Plidco building at full speed. The impact caused severe damage to the building and trapped the 3 occupants inside the vehicle. The crash was captured on CCTV, which showed Shirilla's car zooming toward the building without slowing down or braking. The video also showed Rousseau and Flanagan screaming in terror as they realized what was happening. When the police arrived, they located a Toyota Camry with severe damage and full airbag deployments. All 3 occupants inside the vehicle, including Shirilla, were unconscious, not breathing, and trapped inside. Russo and Flanagan were both pronounced dead at the scene. Shirilla was arrested shortly after the crash and charged with 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, aggravated vehicular homicide, drug possession, and possessing criminal tools. She pleaded not guilty because of insanity and claimed that she did not remember what had happened. The police detained her at a juvenile detention center for evaluation. She did not testify at her trial, which lasted for 4 days. Her lawyer argued that she had a tumultuous relationship with Rousseau and that she planned to end their lives by crashing the car. He also said that there was no evidence that she intended to kill anyone or knew what she was doing. The prosecutors presented evidence that contradicted her defense. He showed TikTok videos of her attending concerts, college parties, and Halloween parties a few months after the crash. These were enough to show her lack of remorse for the incident that had happened that day. He also presented forensic testimony from a certified mechanic who said that the event data recorder of MacKenzie's car showed that she pushed down the accelerator pedal at full capacity, with no application of the brake moments before the crash. She cried during her sentencing hearing as she read a statement apologizing to the families of Rousseau and Flanagan.
The families of Dom and Davia, I'm so deeply sorry. I hope one day you can see I would never let this happen or do it on purpose. I wish I could remember what happened. I'm just so sorry. I'm heartbroken. I love Dom and Davia. We were all friends and Dom was my soulmate. I wish I could take all your pain away. And I'm so sorry.
Before Judge Russo announced her verdict, she said a few things to MacKenzie.
The video clearly shows the purpose and intent of the defendant. She chose a course of death and destruction that day. She morphs from a responsible driver to literal hell on wheels as she makes her way down the street.
While Judge Russo made her statement, MacKenzie broke down in tears.
She made these decisions despite knowing, as any reasonable person would, that her mission of death could have involved others, not even in the car with her. Other people, other cars, pedestrians. She had a mission and she executed it with precision. The mission was death.
Russo said that her most difficult decision in the sentencing came down to whether or not to have the 2-year 15 sentences run consecutively or concurrently.
The difficulty for sentencing today, honestly, is whether or not I believe you should get consecutive sentences. I'm troubled that should I give you a concurrent sentence, that people will believe that somehow I'm being disrespectful to one of the victims. And on the other hand, I have to weigh the punishment. There's a very good likelihood, MacKenzie, that you will spend the rest of your life in prison.
The judge deliberated for less than 2 hours before finding Shirilla guilty of all charges on August 21st, 2022. Cuyahoga County Commons Pleasant Judge Nancy Margaret Russo sentenced Shirilla to 15 years to life for both murder charges. She was found guilty of including 4 counts of murder, 4 counts of felonious assault, and 2 counts of aggravated vehicular homicide. The 2 sentences will be served concurrently. She will also receive credit for time already served and have her driver's license permanently suspended. The families of Russo and Flanagan expressed their grief and anger over Shirilla's sentence. They said they wanted justice for their loved ones who were robbed of their futures. Russo's father also said he did not support Shirilla spending her life behind bars. He called her a kid who did a damn stupid thing. And that's it for this video. If you want to see more crazy courtroom moments, check out this video. And don't forget to subscribe.